let's walk to the bridge and meet me halfway. Now you may see some children there.
Around this time last year, my buddy Matt at Just Okay Designs created this super fun fan art piece of an over the garden wall t-shirt design. And I said to myself immediately, I want to paint that. So I reached out to Matt and I was like, hey man, I want to paint this. Do you mind if I use your artwork as a starting point? And he was like, yeah, no problem. Cool. Love to see what you come up with. So I started this painting without really knowing anything about the cartoon. Had no clue what it was about. It just resonated with me at a sort of deep level. Um, and from there, I started talking to other people about this content because I went and checked out the cartoon and thought it was awesome. And so the following is one of the conversations I had with a good friend of mine, Cliff. We were talking about this painting that I did last year
Hmm.
about the over the garden wall. And I got into a whole, when I started painting it, I didn't even think about it. I just was interested in it. And I had this sort of primal reaction to it.
Hmm.
And I was thinking about how it felt like Halloween and like running around the woods as a kid, like wild. And I didn't even know the story or really hadn't even watched the cartoon. And when I showed it to you, you kind of had a similar reaction, but a very different perspective.
Hmm.
And I just wanted you to take me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I was just telling you basically like, it's just funny how art means like different things to people, right? And so like people live in different worlds, come from different cultures, etc. So, the thing that I was trying to talk to you about was basically like it's just funny to me how, one painting can mean like different things to different people. So when I look at it, first thing I think about is like a childhood, just different times of my childhood. But automatically it takes me to this verse because I was telling you that me, like music for me is like my soundtrack for life. So I could be sitting in a meeting, I could be watching TV, listening to somebody have a conversation. And because I used to listen to music so much, like as a younger person and then throughout my life, it's like certain things people say reminds me of different verses or things I see reminds me of different verses. So one of the things I was telling you is that when I look at that painting, the first thing that pops out to me is this verse from Outkast. I'm born and raised in Atlanta, and I mean Outkast was big for me growing up as a teenager. They represented a lot of different things, and a lot of pride came from them being from Atlanta and being lyrical because back then, we didn't have a lot of lyrical rappers back then from Atlanta.
It was deeper, right? I mean, their lyrics are, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, much
right,
deeper, much
right.
deeper. So, and I always liked lyrics, and I used to have to go to New York rappers to hear lyrics when Atlanta didn't really have lyrical people until they came out. So I followed them very closely. So, anyways, I was telling you that the verse reminded me of this verse from their album. They had an album called Aquemini.
Hmm.
And so the song was also titled Inquimina on that album. And so it was a verse in that song that said, let me see if I can remember. It was a verse. Andre had a verse, which is one of the best ever. Andre, like one of the best ever. But he had this verse in it. And when I look at your picture, for some reason, it reminds me of this verse, which says, let's walk to the bridge and meet me halfway. Now, you may see some children dead off in the pathway. It's those poor babies walking slowly to the candy lady. It's looking bad. I need some hope, like the words maybe, if, or probably. And it reminds me of that verse because that verse, like it starts off by saying, like, let's walk to the bridge and meet me halfway because it was about him as a child. He was basically reflecting on himself as a child and how he used to tell his friend to meet him halfway, before they walked to the pathway. His story was because back then he grew up. I was probably one maybe when this whole situation happened, but the whole thing is basically referring to what he went through as a child, which was Atlanta child murders.
Right,
And so basically what that was it was a situation where it was 28 African American kids that were abducted and killed between the
right.
time I think it was 79, which I was born in 1981. And so I'm not sure how old he was, but he's older than me. So I'm assuming like he was, a child during that time worried about that situation and being kidnapped.
Right.
And so the verse says, like, let's walk to the bridge, meet me halfway. So he wants somebody to meet up with him so, he don't go it alone. And then he said, now you may see some children dead off in the pathway. It's those poor babies walking slowly to the candy lady. And so I was telling you that not only does that remind me of his verse, but it reminds me of when I was, younger. And a lot of times to like go see friends or go to the candy lady sometimes, or even your friends, they live in like apartment complex next to yours, but in most situations it was a situation where you had like woods that
Right.
connected both of those apartment complexes.
Right.
So it was always a scary situation. Like you didn't want to go through there by yourself because
Right.
you didn't know what shady action you was gonna see going on through
Right.
there. And the crazy part is, like, you would see all kinds of stuff sometimes depending on like whose neighborhood you was in. Because sometimes I
Right.
would even go like to a cousin's house and go through their pathway. So it was like when you visit people in other parts of town, you would also it would be the same situation where it'd be like, oh, I got a friend over here, or let's go get some candy. And then you would have to go through these woods that connected two of the places. So
Right.
you would walk through this shady looking area, and like sometimes you would see like abandoned, like look like houses.
It's
Sometimes
scary. It's
yeah,
scary. Yeah, it's
you
just straight up scary. Yeah.
yeah, you see like crackheads just like
Right.
chilling in the woods. Um, like you look down at the ground, you will see sometimes like needles and all
Wow.
kinds of different stuff. So it was always like a scary situation where it was like you never knew like what you would see. So,
Right.
I was just telling you that that painting, weirdly reminds me of that
Right.
verse, and also connects to my own childhood in that situation where things look scary, or going through a wooded area. And like I was telling you that like crackheads and stuff or homeless people or whoever was in that area, as a child, it
You
looked like
scared.
those
Right.
monsters in the picture.
Right. 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 Right.
So the kid, or somewhat what I assume to be a kid in that picture, reminds me of like that feeling of how you feel going through the
Right.
woods
Right.
and not knowing what you were going to expect, for one, but also two, people looking like monsters, or you not knowing what you would see in like the unexpected situation that you didn't know that you would face. And then sometimes you thought that maybe like your life was in danger, or
Well,
like as he connected to the verse, like going through that period of, and feeling like he would get taken, or the parents feeling like they would get taken. So not only did the kids feel like that, the parents felt like that, and they would be like, don't go anywhere by yourself, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, so that reminded me of all of that
right. And
in your
so
picture.
this is what's interesting. Well, first of all, there's so many layers to it, but and we could go in so many different directions. But like what I'm thinking to myself as I'm hearing this story again is the story itself. Like I think I might have told you later that the cartoon, once I started to do more research and watch it and sort of explore it and became a fan of it based on this fan art that my friend did, I understood more that, well, I learned that it was based on, basically it's a retelling of Dante's Inferno,
Hmm.
and it's obviously got themes of all those things like facing fear and perseverance and life and death and monsters and struggle and coming of age and freedom and all these things mixed together, right? And what's fascinating to me is that the artwork was obviously imagined and um, created for this show by one person or a team of people, right? And then Matt took it and did his own interpretation based on his own experience with the show.
Hmm.
And then I reacted to his art and made a painting that probably wasn't that far off from, it definitely looks like his work as well as the original, but it's got my own, a little bit of my own style to it. But it's still, through those three different interpretations of this subject matter, the visceral reaction is still communicating basically the heart of what's, at least a big part of what the art is trying to convey, which is this sense of like I think about just the freedom and the fun of running around like free range as a kid. Halloween, not even Halloween, but just like very different than what you were saying in the rural settings where I grew up, but very similar, right? Like we still had lots of the distance between friends. It was almost always wooded. We almost always wanted to meet each other halfway. We were out to do something fun, but there was this overcoming your own fear to get to that fun, right? So like you got to get to the
Right.
candy lady. So
Exactly.
you got to like grow up and deal with the unknown of what's in the woods at night, to get the reward of whatever you and your friends were up to.
Exactly.
And
Right.
it's just like it's amazing to me that like looking at this art, and honestly I think it really does go back to the original artist, right? And
Mhm.
I always have a hard time. This is another subject, but I always have a hard time with fan art. Like I don't always make fan art because I feel a certain way about it, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like whether it's stealing someone's idea or um, benefiting from the idea because they've already put in all the work and all the marketing and whatever, and then you just go ahead and make some artwork, that's like related to that art or derivative of that art
Mhm.
without really transforming it. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I would have never known about this cartoon or this story or anything related to this content had my friend Matt not done his version of that. So I
Mhm.
feel like creating fan art like expands. Same for you. Like you haven't even heard of this show, you know what I'm saying? And I know you're gonna
Mm-mm.
love it when you watch it. So
Right.
it's just interesting how that's kind of what fan art does is it actually grows the fandom of the thing, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
um but I also think it's just interesting that there's some super deep themes and stories that are being conveyed visually in such a simple primal way. um and I think you just reminded. Well, first of all, I knew about the Atlanta child murders when I was growing up. I was a kid. I
Mhm.
was a little bit older, obviously.
Mhm.
So I was probably around, I was around 9 years old around that
Mhm.
time. And even growing up in Alabama, a state over, I still remember hearing about it because it was scary. I mean, it was like
Mhm.
absolutely scary. Like of course, when you're a kid, you don't think like just like you said, you look at adults or whatever, and you may think they might be a monster, or you're
Mhm.
just scared of them because you see things the way a kid sees it. But like,
Right.
even if you're a state over, I don't know how far it is to Atlanta. You know what I mean? I just know
Mhm.
I know
Mhm.
it's not that far, right?
Right.
So I'm like,
Right.
well, they gonna come over here and get me too. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like you don't
Right.
you don't think that way. So
Right.
um, it just feels like it's a whole lot of things coming together, and it's just fascinating to me. And I just love hearing different people's perspectives, and especially around art and like what things mean to them. And as a painter, you don't really know how things are being received. Um, I don't know. It's just fascinating to me. So I really appreciate you hopping on and giving me that perspective again. And honestly, I look forward to maybe doing this again sometime.
Cool, man. No problem. I appreciate the invite, and I'm glad you found something in that whole story
Oh,
that can relate to the painting. But yeah, I don't know how far fetched it was, to hear my explanation,
it's
and
not
then,
it's not yeah, no, it's not far-fetched at all. That's the
yeah.
thing is it struck a chord with me almost immediately because as soon as you started talking,
Mhm.
I was like, man, this is awesome because it overlaps with how I feel, but it makes
Mhm.
total sense to me. And like,
Mhm.
we had candy ladies too in our area, but like, it wasn't in my neighborhood, and I didn't really
Right.
know that culture. I didn't know that side of it as much.
Right.
And
Right.
it's just
Right.
like hearing that was so, I don't know, man. It just made me feel a certain way inside because I just it clicked. You know what I mean? I was like,
Mhm.
I get
Mhm.
that. Like I totally
Right.
get that. And um, it's interesting because like as the person who's doing the art, sometimes I don't really know why I'm doing things. Like
Right.
I just reacted the same way to Matt's work, and I was like, there's something about this that really intrigues me and fascinates me. And as a painter, a lot of times if I don't act on that almost immediately, I won't stay motivated or I'll move on to something else and I won't
Right.
do the work. And so oftentimes what happens like this is I have to just do the painting and figure out later what it means. Why was I
Right.
interested in it? Why did I care? And like I said to you, it's like oftentimes it takes talking to other people to hear their perspective before it all makes sense. And so
Right. Right.
I just love it, man. I love this
Yeah.
stuff. I love talking about it. I love it, when
That's
other
awesome,
people,
man.
yeah. So I really do appreciate you I mean, from the very beginning, just honestly responding the way, because like if I ask someone to look at stuff or I talk about things with some people, a lot of times people just are too busy or they don't have a thought, or they have a
Hmm.
thought but they don't know how to say it or they're afraid to say it or you know what I'm saying?
Well, you know me, I'm very introspective, so
Yeah,
anything I look at can cause a deep, maybe even dark sometimes,
yeah.
thought process.
No,
But
but it's great.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
great, and I super appreciate it, man. So I think this is cool, man. Like I love
no
this right
problem,
here.
dude.
So
Yeah, I
I'm
do
gonna,
too, man. It's fun.
but yeah, thanks again. I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do it again.
Man, you're welcome, man. I enjoyed it. No problem. Anytime.
Awesome, awesome.